This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome, dear Process Trusters, to episode 495 of the Yellow Wall Pod. I'm your host, Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Sebastian Kiehl's contract extension, two painful losses against Leverkusen and Kiel to start off 2025, Daniel Malen joining Aston Villa, and we'll talk about other transfer targets, and if we can stomach it, we'll also take a look ahead to Friday's match against Eintracht Frankfurt. For all in that and more, joins me Lars Pohlmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm not sure I signed up for all of that and even more, so I was doing fine until roughly 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, well, I also asked for listener questions and we got a lot after yesterday's loss. Unfortunately Matthias is not here. I know we all wanted to hear his rants, but yeah, something came up on short notice, so he had to bail on us. Unfortunate, but yeah, so we're stuck with each other here, Lars. I'm afraid because one of the people asking listener questions was some guy named Lars Pohlmann asking, do we have to do the episode? Yes, Lars, we have to. I honestly don't know where to start. But I think I will just start with my own mini rant before we talk about the games, and that is the contract extension of Sebastian Kiel, because I personally do not think it is based on any merit. And my rant is not only that Sebastian Kiel got an extension, which I don't think is warranted, because Dortmund have not shown any improvements under him or any positive developments where you would say, yes, this is the sporting director that we need to have on the books until 2027. But also, what really irked me was Lars Ricken saying that Dortmund's primary objective is clear. In the coming years, we want to be continuously represent the UEFA Champions League and play the role required for that in the Bundesliga. And that is the sentence that really annoyed me from Borussia Dortmund's managing director for sport, as it says on the website, because I think Borussia Dortmund are large enough. And now if you look at the table and how they're playing right now, granted, it doesn't look like it at all. However, they should be the second best team in the Bundesliga at minimum, given their resources. And I think their primary goal should be that they play for the Bundesliga title. So that at least should be their ambition to be in contention for that. And I think the Champions League qualification, which is obviously vital, as we all know, still should be a byproduct of that ambition, and not say we need to finish in the top four and play the required role in that for the Bundesliga, whatever that means. Anyway, that's just something that really annoyed me, because I think it perfectly sums up the lack of ambition and lack of drive that Borussia Dortmund are portraying on the outside, and I feel like it's reflecting to the inside. And I mean, if you see how this team is playing, it all kind of makes sense, Lars. I don't know what your opinion on this is, but this is something that really irked me on January 9th when the news broke that Sebastian Kiel indeed got a contract extension.
Well, to me it kind of feels like you want to have your cake and eat it too, because quite frankly, if Lars Ricken on that day had said we want to compete for Bundesliga titles, everybody would have showed him the Bundesliga table and said, are you crazy? You are living in a dream world. You're not being realistic. Why do you levy these expectations on a squad that isn't settled? So I kind of feel like he couldn't really have said it any better or worse. Anything he would have said at that point, especially going into two horrendous defeats against Leverkusen and Kiel, in retrospect would have been turned into something else. I think the much more problematic thing isn't, the wording of a press release or whatever. It's the underlying, conviction in Sebastian Kehl, which I guess fair enough. I think on the personal level, I'm not sure he's done a terrible job. I'm not sure he's done a good job either, but I can say with some level of confidence, at least from my own perspective, that Dortmund have signed good players over the last few seasons, even if the squad in itself, A, isn't large enough, and B, isn't constructed in the best manner. But if you look at some of the individual signings, even this summer, I think we were all in agreement, and we shouldn't, suddenly act like we were all prescient in foreseeing this difficult season in terms of, the transfer market. I was quite happy with most of the signings Sebastian Kehl has made over his tenure as sporting director, so it would be disingenuous for me to say he needs to go because of whatever he's done on the transfer market, which is obviously the one thing where we can sort of judge a sporting director based on, performances. The issue that I have, and it's one that permeates the entire club, is the insistence on, let's call it the Dortmund way. The insistence on always going in-house. We've talked about this so much over the last few months. Regardless of which position it is, it seems like as long as you have a past at Borussia Dortmund, you will get a job again, even in a leading position. I'm sure we're going to come to Nuri Sahin a bit later on and his job security or lack thereof. I think for one thing we can say Sebastian Kehl was much more qualified for his job than Nuri Sahin was for the head coaching role. And you could easily make the case, I guess, that both aren't good enough for what Dortmund needs, especially in time of turmoil, in time of the competition in the Bundesliga getting stronger and stronger behind Bayern, who are basically still an outlier just because of, financial might and performance and all that stuff. But yeah, in a vacuum, I guess you can find an argument for and against extending Kehl's contract, but the entire picture, the big picture at Dortmund is just so annoying, and it would have been a nice opportunity, and it would have been nice for them to see it as an opportunity to get some outside influence, get someone in who hasn't played for Dortmund, who hasn't worked for Dortmund over the last 10 years, who isn't a card game buddy of Hans-Joachim Watzke's, and someone to give like a fresh perspective for Dortmund, which I think they desperately need.
Yeah, BVB Ian wants to know, is Kehl the right person to steer this ship?
I mean,
now,
the sporting director at Dortmund doesn't steer the ship. Like, that's not a fair expectation from Sebastian Kehl, because he's a middle manager in some ways, because the Hans-Joachim Watzke, I don't care that he's only in the job until autumn and supposedly has taken a step back from, the day-to-day decisions as they pertain to the sporting level. He's still the one, ultimately, I think, calling the shot in terms of, letting Nuri Sahin go, for example, because he's still in the largest amount of responsibility. But then, obviously, you mentioned Lars Ricken's title earlier, so he's the main man in the sporting sense, and he's only going to get more responsibilities once Watzke is actually no longer involved in the day-to-day. And as I said, Sebastian Kehl is basically a middle manager with a fairly limited scope for creativity or whatever you want to say. It's not like Sebastian Kehl can unanimously say, Nuri Sahin, time to go, or let's sign this player or that player. He's a fairly limited role. So I think the same arguments that are being made in defense of Nuri Sahin right now, that, he's not the main problem, yada, yada, yada. The same can be said about Sebastian Kehl, and there seems to be almost, at least in some quarters close to the club, there seems to be a larger happiness, as it were, to point the finger at Sebastian Kehl than at Nuri Sahin, and that's not something I necessarily agree with.
Well, very interesting. Now let's move on to the game. First, real quick, I guess we can talk about the Leverkusen game. And before we talk about what happened on the field, just want to point out the choreo, the yellow wall shot for Teddy the Bear, and the words that Nobby Dickel found to see off his friend. And I certainly teared up a little when his voice cracked. It was a very solemn moment and a very beautiful moment. Unfortunately, what wasn't nice was that it took about 27 seconds for the makeshift backline to concede against Leverkusen. We had Jan Koto as a right back, we had Riosson as a right center back, and then we had Lewis in the middle and Kaba on the left side. And if I remember correctly, that Nuri Sahin said after the game or before the game that Kaba probably also wasn't really in a physical shape to be in the starting 11. After the Witzel Pongracic and I don't even remember
Meunier
who
and
the
Schulz.
Meunier and Schulz meme. I think we have a new backline meme. Did not help that they tried to pass it out of the back. The first action of the game, and Leverkusen were just like, well, how about a little bit of pressure and we'll see what happens. Now, granted, the shot by Nathan Teller was obviously an absolute rocket, and bit lucky too that he hit it just this perfectly, but nevertheless, that really did set the stage for Dortmund's malaise in that game. Let's say Patrick Schick made it 2-0 in the 8th minute, and then again 3-1. Sorry, Jamie Gittens scored in between in the 19th minute, but it kind of felt over at that point, and it sort of felt to me like Leverkusen could just score whenever they wanted, and luckily it felt to me that Leverkusen were very happy to leave Dortmund with the ball and sort of just keep them at an arm's length, and if there was another chance they would probably have taken it, or if there was real urgency on Leverkusen's side to score another goal throughout the game. Now Girassi did make it 2-3 in the 97th minute via penalty, because Duranville is short, and I forgot, was it Tar's arm or Frimpong's arm? I forgot who he ran it. Tabsoba, yeah. But overall, a game to forget, like the next one we're about to talk about. Lars, do you have any thoughts, good or bad, about this game before we move on to Kiel?
I mean, given the state of the starting lineup, like 2 days after I said on this podcast that the injury crisis is still a few weeks away, that was almost like a karma moment. Obviously, it wasn't really injuries, it was more of a flu situation. I mean, in isolation, I would almost give Dortmund and Schein a bit of a mulligan for that game, because, I mean, when you're starting with Yannick Lewis and Almugera Kaba and Julian Riasson playing a different position against what I would argue is the best team in Germany right now, or at the very least a 1B to Bayern Munich's 1A, that can happen. Obviously, the early goal conceded was very unfortunate. I don't know if the game would necessarily have developed much differently if Leverkusen don't score with their first chance or half chance. I think Dortmund were basically doomed from the start with that starting lineup. So you can almost be a positive person and say, you know, they fought through it. They tried their best. Obviously, the team was at a huge disadvantage, so the result could have gotten out of hand. I think I changed my prediction on Kicktip from a 3-1 Leverkusen win to a 5-1 Leverkusen win when I saw the lineup, because I was not very confident in the defense for obvious reasons. So again, if you want to be a positive person, you can actually say that wasn't half as bad as it could have been and should have been.
Well, they conceded fewer goals than they did against Kiel.
Yeah, so but then again, I would also say, like, the result obviously flattered Dortmund quite a bit. I mean, Leverkusen weren't really happy with their performance, especially in the second half, because they didn't put, or keep the foot on the accelerator. So, but But then again, the penalty for Dortmund, I don't think there was anything in that other than, as you said, Julian Duranville being short and kind of going down. And then obviously, I mean, how far away are we from Dortmund nicking a very lucky point there? I don't know. They didn't really have a concrete scoring opportunity in the final seconds of the game, but still, if people want to model these two games together against Leverkusen and Kiel, I think that's doing a disservice to, the makeshift lineup against Leverkusen, because they invested a hell of a lot of more of efforts into the game than the on paper much better team did against Kiel.
Well, Rob Gordon, aka Falter, has a question for the next game as we move on, and that is, what the actual fuck? And I sort of agree with that question, Lars. What the actual fuck?
I mean, it's a typical Dortmund away from home under Nuri Sahin special. I mean, I don't know if we should actually be surprised at this point. Maybe because Kiel are arguably, next to Bochum and St. Pauli, the worst teams in the Bundesliga in terms of individual quality, but you don't need a lot of quality to beat Dortmund when you're playing at home these days, because you just try to be solid defensively, because Dortmund don't have any ideas how to break open a defense away from home for some reason, as if it makes a difference whose supporters are in the majority. And then you wait for one of the inevitable dumb mistakes even seasoned on paper good players like Julian Brandt make. And then once it's 1-0 to the home side, the game is basically over, because Dortmund are then turning into headless chicken, trying to avoid the inevitable for as long as they can. And in a way, I'm almost happy that Dortmund conceded that ridiculous fourth goal, because otherwise people might have forgotten and maybe 3-4 days down the line would have said, they fought back well, they almost got an equalizer, so they showed some mettle, some life, all good in Dortmund, and nothing two loanies from Chelsea who aren't playing there can fix.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on FB Ref here right now, and yes, it does say that Holstein Kiel are the worst defense in the Bundesliga with 43 goals conceded, which is a lot more than
I mean, they conceded
Bochum's.
2 against Dortmund away from home. Not many teams have
Embarrassing.
have managed that.
But it also says here in this category that Dortmund are best in putting lipstick on a pig. So you're right. I think the fourth goal was very necessary, not to give anyone a chance to say something like we did a step in the right direction or anything else. I mean, to be serious, Lars Ricken did say that the first half was, quote, embarrassing and unworthy. I think talking to Sky after the game, I have the full quote here actually. Professional sport is a competitive sport in which you have to perform for 90 minutes and get results. The first half was embarrassing and unworthy. It wasn't until the 71st minute that we saw what could have been possible today. Blah, 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 blah. 71st minute, obviously, the goal from Gio Reyna. I don't even know if I really want to talk about the individual goals, because his performance overall was just so stinky. I mean, going down 3-0 is embarrassing enough, but then taking, I guess, until the 71st minute to really produce a goal chance.
It wasn't even a chance.
Girassi had something in between, but it's like all half chances, really. I don't even know what to say anymore. I listened to the analysis of Jürgen Körs on the Ruhrnachrichten post-game video show, whatever, and he said that this might have been the worst performance in the 12 or however many years he's covering Borussia Dortmund professionally. Now, I know there were a lot of terrible performances, and I honestly can't measure them up against each other because I forgot most, but just hearing those words just really shows how fucking bad Borussia Dortmund is right now. And Lars, I honestly don't really know where to go from here. I mean, I know where it goes from here. It's not the Champions League, that's for sure. But in all honesty, these are usually the performances in games that make coaches not have a job anymore. Do you think that Nuri Sahin is actually in a danger of being sacked in the medium-term future, especially if Friday does not go Dortmund's way? Or do you think that Dortmund actually stick to the words that they are uttering about trusting Nuri Sahin and continue with him? Because that is really the most pressing question after this, because I personally have lost all confidence in the coach, if I had any to begin with.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we were all in agreement that he shouldn't have gotten the job in the first place. So, I mean, the best opportunity was to not give Nuri Sahin the job. The second best is to terminate the engagement as soon as possible, which, I mean, should have happened. I said it in October. I'll say it again now. I don't think I have any confidence in Nuri Sahin either. I understand that he's not the only issue at Dortmund, and arguably, as we talked about earlier, not even close to being the biggest issue. But I mean, if your house burns down, it's not like you let your kid drown in the pool. You still take it out because that's a problem you can manage. So if Nuri Sahin isn't part of the solution and he is part of the problem, then you have to remove him and find a different solution. I don't know who that would be. That's my personal opinion, and I'm sure people have different opinions and are happy that, you know, there's one of their own, as it were. Although even that can be debated, as we have done before. Is Nuri Sahin really a Dortmund legend? I mean, he left for Real Madrid, and when he came back, he wasn't the same player.
Die Fans wissen, wie ich mich entscheide, is all I'm saying here.
And so that's my personal opinion. Professional, as it were, opinion. Are they going to sack him? No, I don't think so. Because this would have been the obvious opportunity for them to say, you know what, we tried, we gave him our backing, but we just lost 4-2 in Kiel. We can't go on like this. And we have too many important games coming up, so we need like the new manager bounce. Obviously, they wouldn't call it that, but if it hasn't happened now, I don't see why it would happen after losing away to Frankfurt, which is a game they can lose even in a good when they are on a good run of form, because Frankfurt are a good team, and I don't know if
it's away from home.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily have to come into it. You can even lose to Frankfurt at home as Dortmund, because that's a good team. They are in a good run of form. So
yeah, I mean, it was the only game I saw live in the stadium, and I mean, if it weren't for this one huge missed chance,
yeah, Faris Shaibi, and then like 2 minutes later, Jamie Gittens, who I think was still Bino Gittens at that point.
No, I think he was already Jamie Gittens. I was still saying Bino Gittens at that point, but I think he was already Jamie Gittens. But I'm still gonna make that mistake going forward. I apologize.
Yeah, I think the argument that they are going to make is we have these 3 English Wochen in a row, so they are still playing the 2 Champions League games in January. Against next week Bologna, then at home to Donetsk. I guess those are kind of get-right games, because Dortmund, for whatever reason, in the Champions League are showing once again a better face than in the Bundesliga this season. Maybe it's down to playing mostly shit opponents outside of the 2 Spanish giants, with all due respect to Dinamo Zagreb and Celtic and Brugge and Sturm Graz, right?
Yep.
And then Bologna and Donetsk, you can make your own deductions into which category of Champions League opponents I would put those 2 teams. So I'm assuming that they internally will point to, hey, if we change managers now, he won't have any chance to actually get on a training pitch and do anything, so we might as well stick with Sahin and stick with our convictions. The problem is, obviously, if you're going with the internal solution all the time, sacking Nuri Sahin would be an indictment on what I called the Dortmund way earlier. It would be admitting a massive mistake they've made, and they've made this mistake numerous times now. So I either don't really have the confidence in, you know, Dortmund's institutional strength to look in the mirror and say, hey, we got this one wrong, let's remedy that. I think they're going to try to ride it out as long as they can, and I don't know how long that is. if they need to lose 3 more games in the Bundesliga, if they have to almost drop into a relegation battle, which is, I mean, that's not going to happen because the teams at the bottom are too weak this season. I mean, how many points would Dortmund need to be safe? Like maybe 3 more wins will do the trick or whatever. So that's not going to happen, obviously. But I don't know what their red line, as we say in German, is for Nuri Sahin, because my red line has been reached numerous times this season already.
Yeah, so you did tweet actually that Nuri Sahin might be a good coach one day. He's in way over his head with this team. It's time to pull the plug before the season becomes completely unsalvageable.
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
October
right,
October 26th. Now my question is, Lars, after this loss in Kiel and potentially a loss in Frankfurt, do you think the season already is unsalvageable? I can't even say it. Unsalvageable.
I don't know. I mean, I think I said
All
this
right.
before the exit in the cup. That might have been the last week of October or the first week of November, whatever. I mean, if they beat Frankfurt, they are back in the Champions League race. If they lose to Frankfurt, they are 11 points behind third place. So this seems like a big game.
Yes.
We talked about last week that the Champions League race is probably going to come down to Dortmund v Leipzig v Stuttgart for 2 places. Now, if that's the case, then I don't know how much they will lose in the first few matches of the season or of the second half of the season, because Leipzig have a tough schedule. Stuttgart are also not having an easy time in terms of opponents. So, but I think ultimately it doesn't really matter what other teams are doing, because right now Dortmund can put one foot in front of the other. So they have enough problems at home so that we don't have to look at other teams.
All right. But we should look at other coaches real quick, because I know listeners certainly want to know. Asenbø asks what coaches can save us from Ten Hag, meaning that he has been rumored with the Dortmund, linked with the Dortmund job. So I think have Roger Schmidt and Urs Fischer. Lars, if you, as you said, were to fire Nuri Sahin now or yesterday rather, and who would be on your short list to replace Nuri Sahin out of maybe the names I just named or others?
I mean, Erik Ten Hag is a good football coach. I still believe that. I don't think his time at Manchester United was necessarily representative of what he can do, because he did much better at Ajax. I know for a fact that Bayern Munich were very impressed with him when he was their second team coach. Obviously, that's the time from which Matthias Sammer knows him very well, who's arguably his champion in Dortmund's corner and in Watzke's ear, I would assume. I don't think Erik Ten Hag would be a terrible choice, to be honest. Just don't give him too many players from Ajax, which I don't think is a real issue, because Dortmund don't have that much of a budget for the winter transfer window. I think Roger Schmidt is the first port of call for all big-ish German clubs. I mean, when Leipzig were considering sacking Marco Rose in late autumn, Roger Schmidt would have been the obvious one to call, because he already coached at Salzburg back in the day. But I think it's been fairly conclusively reported that Roger Schmidt doesn't want to take over a team during the season. And also, I think some of the personality traits that he shows are not necessarily Dortmund material. I think he would be a tough sell on fans as well. Not that that necessarily has to have any real impact, but it is what it is. I mean, if Urs Fischer is really a candidate, then shit must be really hitting the fan. I mean, he's basically, if you...
I mean, sort of is.
Yeah, but you're still Borussia Dortmund. You would assume that you have a bit more pull than going with someone who's been out of a job for a year and is basically, if you crossed Peter Stöger with Lucien Favre and made the football even more boring, that would be Urs Fischer. So I don't know. I think...
I'll be honest, Urs Fischer gives me big Peter Stöger vibes.
but he's Swiss, so he's also Favre. I don't know. And I think the
I just feel like that would be it just gives me the same feeling of interim manager decision. I don't even know if they were to hire Urs Fischer now, if that would be like until the end of the season, or if they were actually say this is our guy for.
Obviously not.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be the Stöger route of we need someone to steady the ship. He's done it before in the Bundesliga. We know he can solidify defense and all that. It's not exciting, but might work out. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the most interesting name coming out today was Sandro Wagner. He's the assistant coach at the German national team. He doesn't have all the coaching badges, just like Nuri Sahin.
Who cares?
But that obviously doesn't seem to be much of an issue at Borussia Dortmund these days. I know for a fact that he's very highly regarded at the national team, which is obviously where a lot of the players will know him from, and also Hans-Joachim Watzke being one of his many jobs in football is being vice president of the German Federation, so he will have some level of insight there. But I highly doubt that Dortmund are going to sack Nuri Sahin just to give the job to another rookie head coach, as it were. So that would be more of a let's see if Nuri Sahin survives till the end of the season, but then they part ways. Maybe then Sandro Wagner would make a bit more sense.
You can hear from my side that I'm not really intrigued with any name that I just heard, nor am I intrigued with the state of things as they are. I'm just really extremely annoyed. So yeah, Borussia Dortmund did not return to Dortmund, but are training at the DFB training facility to prepare themselves for Frankfurt. One of the players obviously not around anymore is Daniel Mahlen. He joined Aston Villa, which made him the lucky devil of the game against Kiel, because I'm happy for him that he did not have to witness all that in person anymore. But I think we still need to talk about it. Obviously, Daniel Mahlen did spend quite a while here, and Borussia Dortmund did spend 30 million on him, and I think recoup that, if you take the whole tax predicament out of it, more or less by selling him, I think, for 25 million plus bonuses, where 3 of those 5 million bonuses are more or less guaranteed, and the other 2 million are also relatively easy to achieve, I assume. Lars, was it the correct decision to sell Daniel Mahlen for Dortmund to have a little bit of money to now throw around on other players, or do you think they should have held on to him for dear life as they do with other coaches?
I mean, we talked about this last week. I think it was almost inevitable because Daniel Mahlen has wanted to leave for a while now. I was surprised back then, and I am surprised now that a Premier League / Champions League side came in for him, because I don't know that. I think that's his level often enough during the season. I'm sure there's going to be 3 to 5 match days in the second half of this season, and then every half year where people from Birmingham are pointing their fingers and laughing at Dortmund. How could they let this demon go? But there's also going to be 10, 12 match days in which Daniel Mahlen is completely invisible. And the thing for a Premier League side is, if he doesn't cut it, put him on the bench, maybe sell him in a couple of years with a big loss, doesn't matter. Whereas for Dortmund, signing a player for 30 million who doesn't really cut it at the upper echelon of your level of expectation is a real problem. I think if we think back to when Daniel Mahlen was signed to be the successor for Jadon Sancho, and then during his time, Jadon Sancho came back and had a bigger impact than Daniel Mahlen for a Champions League final run. That kind of says a lot. I mean, that he was miscast in the role he's played for most of his tenure at Dortmund. Sometimes his ability, which is considerable, his directness, his goal threat, also his tenacity in attacking, if he wants to which isn't always the case. His ability shone through from time to time, and that's why he scored quite a few goals for Dortmund, but I don't think anyone's going to remember Daniel Mahlen in like 5 years and think, oh, remember when Daniel Mahlen was Dortmund's best player, even though he scored the most goals? No, he wasn't. He was there, and then now he isn't, and I don't think he's going to leave too much of an imprint. And depending on how they used the money he left, it was an obvious decision.
All right. I'll be honest, I'm not fully read up on all the transfer rumors right now and what the situations are. Lars, if you are, can you give us a quick rundown of what now looks like it's likely to happen next, as Borussia Dortmund surely will sign somebody, right?
I mean, you have to look at Chelsea's reserves or bench, because that seems to be the only port of call for them, outside of players who already played in the Bundesliga. And there's someone on Chelsea's bench who has done both, which obviously makes him a prime candidate to move to Dortmund, which is
matches all the categories.
I mean, it would be what a life to be a Dortmund scout these days, because you only need to watch the Bundesliga and like sort Transfermarkt for who didn't play for Chelsea over the last few weeks. The defenders is Gabriel Veiga. I don't know why, but he's a Portugal international. I mean, he doesn't play for Chelsea, and he played for Basel before then, so I would have assumed that the player pool for Portugal is a bit bigger than that, but here we are. People might remember him from an absolutely legendary performance at Augsburg for half a season, in which I think his best grade in for Kicker, the biggest German football magazine, was a 4, which is like a D, I think, in the American sense. And he was rated below D, so that's an F for failure, I guess, a few times during that season. So
yeah, I had this discussion with my wife why they don't have E's in the school system here. I don't know, but yeah.
Because it's it's a fail grade, not a passing grade, which doesn't matter how much you failed, I suppose.
I guess you're right.
In all earnestness, he supposedly can cover a lot of positions defensively. He can be a left back, center half, defensive midfielder. So obviously that kind of versatility is something Dortmund should be after, because they need cover in multiple positions. And another Chelsea reject, Carney Chukwuemeka, central midfielder, more of a number 8, which we talked about last week. I would like for them to sign someone in that position, but not necessarily as the, number 1 priority.
Well, I think it also needs someone to be an upgrade over the players we currently have.
And now the 22-year-old who's played like 800 minutes in 1.5 seasons for Chelsea. When he moved there from, I think, Aston Villa, Dortmund were already interested, but he's one of those young guys who go to Chelsea and think they're going to play. And I never know if I should feel any level of sympathy for them, because Chelsea have like 45 players and they sign 15 every season. And unless the head coach takes a particular liking to you, you're going to leave on loan and then spend a year in Strasbourg and then be sold wherever. Now the loan might be at Dortmund.
I was going to say, I mean, you have a fallback option at Borussia Dortmund. Could be worse.
Yeah, could it?
Maybe not.
And the third rumor, which I don't know how excited it gets people, but it seems like the only option that might be long-term for Dortmund, Alexander Zinchenko, left back / central midfielder, kind of a weird profile from Arsenal. Obviously been coached quite well by Pep Guardiola at Man City. I think when he left Man City for Arsenal, a lot of people expected a bit more from him. Would be kind of an interesting solution, just because he's got extensive high-level experience both at left back and in central midfield, but also he's 28, not much resale value, if any. Like, that's kind of been the deal Dortmund have done over the last few years, which hasn't, or have rarely worked out. So I don't know if that's a better solution, but then again, at least getting someone who's not only planning to stay until whenever the Club World Cup ends would be nice.
I mean, from a profile, Zinchenko would fit maybe a little bit of Nuri Sahin's preferred fullback role, someone that also sort of tucks into the inside and does some build-up responsibilities too, just like Ian Maatsen did. So I presume in that regard it could help, but yeah, honestly, yeah, it's not looking great. I do hope that Dortmund dig up a fullback in some capacity, though, that can also play center back, because I think that's relatively important considering how Dortmund's center back situation is looking right now. So
I think I misnamed the Vega kid. It's not Gabri. He was a Spanish midfielder who's now in Saudi Arabia. It's Renato Vega. Apologies to Renato, who I'm sure is listening in preparation for his 6 month spell at Dortmund.
Yeah, probably. I think if you listen to this, you're not coming. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, there were also questions, speaking of central midfield. Justin Vincente wants to know how much longer with Brandt. And that is a question I would actually ask in us preparing a little bit for, or not preparing, but looking ahead to Friday's game against Frankfurt, because Gio Reyna did obviously come on and score a goal. I've not really checked now whether he equaled Brandt's goal scoring record or actually went ahead of Julian Brandt this season, because in the Bundesliga, they are I think on par now. I personally think I'm at the point where I would play Gio Reyna instead of Julian Brandt, considering how sloppy Julian Brandt is, considering how we talked about this before. Julian Brandt was nowhere to be seen when players approached the fans after the game. He has been dubbed the face of the club by some in the upper echelons of Borussia Dortmund, and I don't know. I see quelling frustration about the way he's taking corner kicks, because they currently seem to not be able to go past the first defender, which is never a good thing. But overall, it's just his performances are hapless and not really where they need to be. It is not the leadership we need, and he is one of the players that should step up right now in a big way, and he just really is not. So to me, that's the prime candidate for a good benching. Sabitzer is also not far off. It was also someone who could start. Gio Reyna could start instead of. But this is where I'm at right now. I think I would mix things up. My hope is that Dortmund's backline overall or squad will be a little bit more healthy and fit against Frankfurt. I'm not entirely sure if Adeyemi is going to return or not. That obviously also would help to have him available. But yeah, that's just where my thoughts lie right now on lineup decisions. Where are you at on the Gio Reyna versus Julian Brandt debate right now?
I mean, if Matthias Zug is Gio Reyna's biggest detractor, I am his biggest supporter. I just have a thing for the way Gio Reyna plays and glides around the pitch and scores nice goals, even when Dortmund aren't playing well. I don't know. I'm more easily convinced that Gio Reyna is a good idea for Dortmund than most people, I suppose. And that might extend to the game against Frankfurt. I'm 100% with you on Julian Brandt. I'm sort of sick of seeing him skulk around, not be a part of anything. I think for as much shit as everyone's always giving Emre Can, you can't really question his effort level ever. I mean, sometimes he just isn't good enough or makes dumb decisions or whatever, but he tries, and he tries to lead. He was alongside Schlotterbeck, who I think it's clearer and clearer by the day. He's actually kind of the captain of this team, or the emotional leader, whatever you want to say. Can was one of the guys talking to the fans after the game in Kiel. which I'm sure is not easy for him because there's a obviously strange relationship between Emre Can and Dortmund fans in general. So I'm willing to give him some kudos on that. So if Julian Brandt tried as hard as Emre Can, then he would play better because he's obviously a much more gifted, naturally talented football player, but he just doesn't try enough. So I think if you wanted to make sort of a statement in terms of the lineup, then Julian Brandt would be an obvious point to tackle. Also because Dortmund have the alternative to play Gio Reyna. They might have the alternative to play in a different setup. Pascal Groß is coming back from suspension. He should have fresh legs, so maybe you put Metscher in a bit more of a forward role. There are ways to compensate for Julian Brandt not playing and the way he's played over the last few games. Even though there was an uptick in performance ahead of the winter break, I think that uptick has very much turned southwards in these two games against Leverkusen and Kiel.
Yeah, from an uptick to a down tap. I don't know what you would even call that, but yeah, really embarrassing stuff from Julian Brandt. Other than that, I don't even know what things to change about the lineup. I like to see Gitten and Durenville start. I mean, obviously, if Adeyemi is fit, I would probably put him in the starting lineup if he is fit enough to start. But that being said, I'm almost content to just experiment around a little bit because whatever you're doing now isn't really working anyway. So, yeah. Can I be honest with you? I think it's going to be another grueling defeat in Frankfurt. I think that Dortmund will not show the reaction that should be necessary. What Dortmund have shown in the past usually is that they do show reaction after games like the one in Kiel, and that they sort of start showing up when things are getting tight in terms of Champions League qualification. That they have managed to flip the switch and turn things around. But I don't know, my gut feeling tells me that this is, for one, not the case. And we talked about the season being unsalvageable. And I feel like this is sort of the cherry on top of the cherry on top of the shit sandwich that this English week now was. And I think that Dortmund will concede somewhere between 3 and 5 goals again on Friday. And I don't know if Nuri Sahin is still employed after that because things can go quick in this business. But yeah, this is sort of just my general feeling and expectation going into this game, and I'd be very surprised if Dortmund pull out even a draw. I mean, not very surprised because they have the individual quality, but you know what I mean. I don't know. It just feels like something in this team is broken. And defensively, they do not have any organization whatsoever to probably hold up against Eintracht Frankfurt. Those are sort of my 2 cents. How do you see Dortmund approach this game? And do you think they'll come away with anything other than a loss?
Well, firstly, I'm surprised you're putting cherries on sandwiches. Maybe that's an American thing. Maybe I should try that. I think obviously what we haven't talked about, sort of an elephant in the room with the game against Frankfurt is Omar Marmoush going to be a part of that? Is it his final game for Frankfurt before he leaves for Manchester City, or is the transfer in such an advanced stage or even completed by then that they are not going to start him because, one misstep, an injury costs you, I don't know how many millions. I don't know that they were at that point again in the 2 games against St. Pauli and Freiburg, Frankfurt were, which they both won, and in which Marmoush both scored. And I think he had 3 scoring points against Freiburg, so he's still the man at Frankfurt. So if they sell Marmoush ahead of the game, or if he's not playing because of an upcoming transfer, I think that does make a difference, because I think if he hasn't been the best player in the Bundesliga this season, he's number 2 behind Jamal Musiala, I would say. I don't know how many other candidates there might be. I don't watch too much games outside of Dortmund these days. And really, I shouldn't watch those either. So if he can't go, then I think there is a chance that this is more of a cagey game. Usually the games at Frankfurt have been very entertaining, especially for neutral viewers, if such a thing exists. I think back to a 3-3 draw in which refereeing decisions were very curious indeed for both sides. Even the games at Dortmund against Frankfurt have been usually quite entertaining. I think Frankfurt have a very interesting squad. Sort of the thing that Dortmund should be building with a bit more money. So the players might be like 5% better, but just in terms of the profiles they're going for, they always have a plan. When Frankfurt sells someone, they don't really lose a beat. And when Dortmund sell their best players, they sign Felix Metscher or Daniel Mahlen for 30 million and wait until they break out, and maybe they don't. So my feeling is very similar to yours. I don't really see how they pull anything out. I don't see this as the year in which the prospect of losing out on the Champions League galvanizes the team into getting their act together. Just don't see it. Just feel like, as you said, there's something fundamentally broken. And I'm pretty sure they are going to be faced with the exact same questions about Nuri Sahin after that game. And I'm pretty sure that Sebastian Kehl, and if he talks to the media, which he doesn't always do, Lars Ricken always says, we don't have to have that discussion. It's about the players, yada, yada, yada. It is about the players, but you can't, change 10, 15 players, but you can change one coaching staff. So that's ultimately what I think should happen, but we don't have to rehash that discussion again.
Yeah. I'm just, one thing that irked me about Ricken's quotes that he says is that the team was set up tactically well enough to defeat
and emotionally
Kiel
as well, which, I mean, that's demonstrably not the case.
It's just horse shit.
Yeah.
It's just horse shit. Okay? Let's just call it what it is. It's horse shit. There's a shit sandwich without a cherry this time. Not even on the sides. It's just straight up bullshit, and I'm not gonna take this nonsense. I'm sorry. It just annoys me. I'm not Lars Ricken's biggest fan so far in his role as sporting CEO. I'll be honest. I don't know. It's just not good enough. And I appreciate that they actually publicly defend their coach in a time of turmoil, which is something that Edin Terzic, I think, did not really receive as much when things got sour for him. So at least in that regard, props, I guess. But nevertheless, I don't think that Dortmund right now have the tactical acumen, if you want to call it that, to play to the level of the squad, and that lays on the doorstep of the coach, I think. Anyway, I don't want to be mad any longer, so I think this is a good time to end this show, and I think we'll have another one after the Champions League game against Bologna, unless we have to do a Champions not a Champions League, an emergency episode. Lars, do you have any final thoughts before we get out?
No, I'm going to watch Bologna against Inter, not because I want to be prepared for the Champions League, but because Inter is the one joy I have in football these days.
Good for you. I will later go to watch the Philadelphia 76ers lose to the New York Knicks after I paid a lot of money for tickets that are now worth, I think, $20 or less since Joel Embiid is out. So it is not good enough that Dortmund are shit. I have another plight in my life. Anyway, as always, everyone out there, thank you for listening. I would say cheer up, but why? Anyway, until next time, goodbye.